What happens when a successful podcaster walks away at the height of her influence to answer a call from her 19-year-old self holding a paintbrush? Today's guest did exactly that, and what she discovered on the canvas transformed not just her own healing work, but her entire approach to helping women reclaim the parts of themselves they've abandoned along the way. Monica Rodgers is a catalyst, companion, and mentor for awakening women. As a seasoned coach, former podcaster, spiritual practitioner, and intentional creativity facilitator. She specializes in creative expression and consciousness raising spaces that help women investigate and transform the underlying conditions keeping them from being seen, heard, and fulfilled. After hosting the Revelation Project podcast for several years, Monica returned to art school at 54 to study medicine painting, a decision that revolutionized her approach to transformation work. Welcome, Monica. Thanks for being here on Chat Off the Mat.
It's so good to see you, Rose. So
Same
good to
here.
be here. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'd love to start out just by telling the audience about yourself.
Yeah. So I am 55 years old and I am learning new things about myself every day. In fact, I'm really celebrating the fact that I took a 2-year sabbatical and I'm going right now just into this whole realization and period of revelation that I have met all these new aspects of myself over these 2 years that I didn't even know about myself. So what I think my message to everyone who's listening is, if you can make space, you will be graced with so many revelations about yourself. And don't get me wrong, Rose, they haven't all been comfortable or joyful, but they've taught me so much about who I am when I'm not being rushed, when I'm not competing, when I'm not pushing, when I'm not provoking, when I'm not, trying to put out the next offer, when I'm not grinding, right? And it's just been such a reset to my nervous system. So I'm a revealer, I'm a healer, I'm an artist, I'm a rites of passage practitioner, and I love that the box is expanding, right? There's no set kind of identity. I don't feel attached to a particular identity, but it's expanding as I go. And I'm so glad I can say that at 55.
Love that. Oh, wow, that's great. I love that. I don't think people or women give themselves permission to
Mm.
pause and to stop and to really think about what they want or even allow it to come, to surface or to show itself as you did.
Well, yeah, because most of us are over functioning in our lives already at such a level that we think, well, if I'm not here to do it, who's going to do it?
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of the point. It's kind of like I said, the revelations that I had were not all comfortable. They were showing me, where was I over functioning? Where was I doing the work of 2 or 3 or 4 people? Right. Because we're so competent as women.
Yeah.
We're amazing, but just because we should. Right. Or just because we can doesn't mean we should. And so it's it really kind of brought me back into harmony and balance, especially with my nervous system. That's been my biggest aha, is this is what I've needed to have a regulated nervous system.
Yeah. I'm speaking to many women, they are recognizing that they're burnt out. They are feeling that in their bodies and they're learning, almost being forced to pause because things come up like illnesses will come up, chronic pain comes up, and then they're forced to slow down. But recognizing it maybe even before that happens and pausing and pivoting even, I think that's really important. And let's talk about you going back to school at what was it, 55?
Well, at the
No.
time, I guess I was
Yeah.
53. Yeah. Yeah.
53. Okay. So I mean I went back and became a yoga teacher at 55, so I can definitely relate to trying something different that called to me. So let's
Yeah.
talk about your journey going back to art school and having a new adventure in your life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It was so, and has been, continued to be so powerful because artwork, art, the canvas, it can be like a mirror, especially for those of us that really love to go, I've never been like a snorkeler. I've always been like a deep diver, I love to, I'm not a big small talk person. I like to kind of really go as deep as somebody will allow. And for me, that's where I can breathe, interestingly enough, right? Like I realized at a point in my life that I had stopped breathing. Like, and I love that spirit in Hebrew is called ruach, or I think I'm saying it correctly, but it's like that's the breath. The breath is the spirit. And I had stopped breathing at some point in my life. Like I was really shallow breathing. And so there were points, Rose, where I would like get to the canvas and I would meet myself in the shallow breath again. And I would like get really curious, like, oh, who's here right now? Oftentimes it was the perfectionist, right? Who thought like, I can't do this. Who do I think I am? What do I think I'm doing? Right? It was a way of meeting myself and so many of the fractured parts of myself, even after all this work that I had exiled and hadn't really reintegrated and met with love and compassion in a way that, really just allowed me to play again, allowed me to inhabit my body in a way that was full of life and pleasure and joy, right? It was like I was meeting all of the limitations, everything that was keeping me from those things. And so art became this fascinating journey. In a lot of ways, it continued the revelation project for me. And those that are listening, that's been my framework over the course of the last 16 years. I call it the revelation project. I think everybody's life is their own revelation project. But revelation doesn't have to be passive. It takes courage to reveal. It takes intention to reveal. It takes skill, right? And it also takes a devotion to the truth because, there's a lot of things we don't want to face, that we don't want to look at because it's so uncomfortable. But what I've learned is that when we are able to just be with what's arising, we're able to experience so much more freedom on the other side of it. And it's informed everything. It's informed the way I move in the world. It's informed my relationships. It's informed my career and how I want to go back to work, right? I'm not there yet, but it's certainly giving me a new framework for how to bring more ease and joy and a new way of working and living.
What is the process? Is there a process? And maybe it's something like, someone like myself. I've done something like this before, and I was guided to do this, where it started to reveal those shadow parts of myself or those hidden parts that I forgot about that I needed to, like you said, reintegrate or recognize again and reconnect with. So
Yeah.
is that how it shows up for you?
Yeah, well, I want to give credit where credit's due and speak the name of my teacher in all of this because she was so the voice of permission, right? She was so the voice of, this isn't about an outcome. This is about an intention, and this is about meeting yourself. And her name is Shiloh Sophia. So she's one of the many teachers I ended up meeting on this journey. And what I loved about her approach was yes, it was very much in layers. It starts with an intention. It starts with like moving your body, as you're kind of just drawing on the canvas. It's like a non-attached, it's very kind of Buddhist in nature. It's a very non-attached way of kind of just starting to put color on the canvas, using the elements, spraying it down, watching the colors kind of like blend and intermingle. And then, it's not really about bringing the painting into form until maybe the 12th or 13th layer even. It's just about play, really, and letting what wants to arise come through. And oftentimes she would guide us. And so there was often a framework or a method. Like one of the particular journeys that I took was called Legend. And it was all about meeting the legend within, right? Another one was called Meeting the Muse. So at the very end, you're bringing form to a face, but it's taken 13 layers for a face or a body to start showing itself to you. And suddenly, you see a form and you can pull that form into being. And suddenly you're meeting your muse and she has a face, or he, right? And so it can be very magical. And of course, that's just one way to approach this. There are so many different methods to doing this. But I've found that now that I'm coming back into my work, one of my favorite modes of working with women is in what I call rites of passage. And so helping women come into and meet the various archetypes that they're that are significant in their own lives that they might not be aware of, right? Like this is the revelation project after all. And so it really is about kind of like meeting these parts of ourselves that have been unconscious, right? And recognizing that as women, we have these amazing archetypes available to us that have often journeyed with us along the way and we haven't even realized it, right?
What are some examples?
Okay, so for right now in my life, at this stage of my life, 55, I'm meeting the wise woman, right? She's an archetype that has lived within me for the last few years, but I wasn't realizing, because some other people call her the crone, right?
Or the Empress. That's
The Empress.
yeah.
Yes. Okay. So here, and it's also about like recognizing like what feels good in my body. What do I want to call her? But the energy is similar, right?
Mhm.
The energy is similar. And so I realized like this wise woman has learned to pause. She's learned to pull back. She's learned to observe. She's learned non-reaction, right? She's learned no
Right.
as a full sentence,
I love that one.
right? It's just like,
Yes.
no.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And she's learned yes as a full bodied, like that lights me up, that turns me on,
But
right?
she's learned. So
She's
it's a
learned.
journey to learning that,
Yeah. And
right?
so, like, identifying, yeah, what does it feel like to be the wise woman? What does it feel like to embody the wise woman? Yeah.
Well, that's a great one. It really aligns with my audience and the messaging around this podcast is identifying with an archetype like that. A very powerful woman archetype.
Yes.
Yeah, I love
Yes.
that.
And Rose, the other thing I would love to bring in here is what I would call a shadow archetype that often plagues women. And until they have a context for her and can see her, they can't really escape her. And so it's really important. And one of the things that I really help women identify is where she is suffering from the wounded maiden. And what that means is that we have healthy archetypes, and each archetype has its shadow archetype, right? Which is why with the crone and the wise woman, you see its shadow archetype, even though I don't consider it a shadow archetype in fairy tales as the witch,
Yes, right.
right? But
Hunched over, right.
I don't consider her a shadow. I consider her like also a wise woman. But anyway, we digress. The wounded maiden. So when women come into maidenhood, they're like my daughter at age 20. Well, now she's 23, but she's still kind of this maiden in full bloom because she's been allowed to bloom. She hasn't had a death mother who's tried to keep her small, right? And I had to learn to reparent myself so I didn't become that type of mother, right? Because so many of us either had wounded maidens as mothers, or we had what I call the death mother, it wasn't intentional. It was unconscious, but oftentimes mothers in a patriarchal society will limit their daughters and keep their daughters small to keep them safe,
Mm.
perhaps, right? Or they
Yeah.
become jealous because they themselves were not self-actualized. And so we have to learn to recognize the wounded maiden in ourselves, the parts of ourselves that are jealous, that are, see life through a scarcity lens, that are always carrying the burden basket, that are filled with drama. I mean, you've met a wounded maiden when you're like, oh my God, there's so much drama happening there, right? That's
Right.
a wounded maiden. And oftentimes I'll walk into a room and start listening and women are gossiping about other women. I'm like, oh, I'm in a room of wounded
Right.
maidens, right? So it's really important for us to recognize that there's a name for this. And to also realize that as women, we've come by this honestly, right? It's how we've been socialized, it's how we've been conditioned. But our job in doing this work is to decondition ourselves. Our job is to unbecome from who everyone else told us to become who we truly are. And many of us have been like, I don't know how to stop participating in this, but I don't like it. Right? I don't like this part of myself. So learning to meet that part of ourselves with non-judgment and just be able to say, I see that the wounded maiden's in the room, like bring her love and compassion. But of course, that's a lot of the work that I've now brought to the painting process because it's right there.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I could see you helping there are a lot of wounded maidens out there. And that's why there are people like yourself, more people like yourself showing up to help them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and recognizing that, to give yourself that compassion because it wasn't your fault.
That's right. Yeah.
So
I
powerful.
love wounded maidens. I just, right, like want to help them cross over, right? Like come through that aspect of their rites of passage because in our society, women are suspended. They're infantilized in a lot of ways. They're not allowed to come into full bloom. Really, this work is about breaking the bullshit rules that
Yeah.
keep us from really like daring to shine,
Yeah.
daring to claim our gifts, daring to wave our freak flag and be unique and
Yes.
right, like all of these
Absolutely.
things. It's like that's
Absolutely.
my favorite work is just helping women find the key that she's always had inside, but she's letting herself out of the cage.
You when we spoke, we had a little quick chat a while ago. You talked about the hero's journey and the heroine's journey. Why does it
Mhm.
matter that we learn the heroine's path? We talk about both, and
Yeah.
it
My
aligns with what we
gosh.
just talked about.
Yeah, well, we all see the hero's journey because it's on every movie, right? It's in every movie. It follows a pattern, and it's a very outward journey. It's a very masculine journey, right? It's outward seeking, and so it's all about conquering and
Yeah.
claiming. And so the heroine's journey is the inner journey, and she includes the masculine. So you won't find a hero's journey that necessarily includes the feminine, but all heroines' journeys include the masculine. And the first step the heroine has to take as she steps out on her journey is she has to break up with the feminine. And of course, our society does that really. She doesn't have to, but in this society, it's very important to show a woman you didn't break up with the feminine on purpose. You broke up with the feminine because everything in society taught you to
Right.
be misogynistic toward the feminine. So when you started becoming the maiden, that was the last thing you wanted to do. In fact, you'd seen the feminine denigrated and oppressed. Why would you want to become it, right? So here you might have been as a 10-year-old girl starting to have budding breasts or starting, your menses or later and thought like, "Oh my God, like I don't want to become this," right? And so it's really important that women see that the heroine's journey has these very validating places through the societal lens where the feminine, like almost like she'll often identify with the masculine because it's her way of getting her needs met in the
Mm.
world. And so, but at some point, she learns that she has to come home to herself. She has to, meet the feminine on a different ground. She has to meet kind of like all of these parts of herself that she's exiled and bring them back into harmony. And it is it's very much a solitary journey. It's a very inner journey. But what I love about the work we do with the heroine's journey is there's kind of a journaling process that she goes through and she can see, oh my gosh, like she can take the model of the heroine's journey. And for those of you listening, there's a great book and a workbook out there by Maureen Murdoch. And it allows you to kind of go through the various steps of a heroine's journey and see how it parallels to your own life. And it is always astonishing to most women. I mean, to the point of like, so much release and relief because so many women think they're crazy. So many women
Yeah.
are like, am I
We're
crazy?
we're told we're crazy.
Right. And so when she can see aspects of her own journey in this archetypal way, she's suddenly like, oh my gosh, like there's there is a method to this madness. There is a roadmap. It's the soul's roadmap. And it's one of many, because the other one that you and I talked about was the journey of Inanna,
That's right.
right? And the journey of Inanna is another one. And once women realized that that was an ancient Sumerian story, and it's almost the blueprint for women's inner journey to go through the seven gates where she meets, right? She meets her dark sister, her shadow,
Right.
and she gets to see like and embrace those dark sides of herself.
Cool. I'd like to talk about your shamanic study. I know I'm kind of popping around. You've got
Yeah,
so
it's
many
okay.
wonderful things to talk about here. And you've also done shamanic work for the past several years, and you incorporate this into your practice. Now, a lot of people don't know what that is, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you could just briefly talk about it and how you integrate it into your work or into your healing on your own journey.
Yeah, sure, sure. So I think that we all have the capacity to do shamanic work. I do think there are very much people who are kind of born with a shamanistic soul, right? But I think that shamanism is becoming much more acceptable and powerful as people do their shadow work. And it's so essential, but it is, I mean, I don't have the definition of shamanism, so I'm going to just kind of do my best here. I study through an ancient lineage of shamans going all the way back to the Shipipo. And I study through a Celtic shaman called Carrie Hummingbird. And has blended basically, indigenous shamanistic practices with her own. And so many people get so offended about, kind of this idea of appropriation. But the fact of the matter is, we all come from, like, at least in America, right? Like, we come from lands that we were forced to immigrate from. And so I had maybe my own was initially Celtic, right? Like, I would love to be able to study under Celtic shamanists, but there aren't many of them, right?
Right.
Shamans anymore. And it's amazing, once you do start the shamanic studies, and there's a wonderful gentleman out there called Alberto Valdo, and he's just wonderful. He's made shamanistic studies so available, as has Carrie Hummingbird, to people who are curious about it. But it's an ancient way of working with the shadow. It's an ancient way of journeying, taking the inner journey. And so you're taught the teachings, tools, and practices of shamanism through that work. And it's like, again, it's like validating that the inner journey is just as important as the outer journey, if not more so. Because in so many ways, as above, so below, as within, so without, if we're not given a context for our inner journey, we can often feel lost. We can get kind of caught in the quagmire of, what the shamans call the Maya, which is the world of illusion. And we can get trapped in what some shamans call a mind virus, because we don't understand what we're navigating. So it's really important that anyone listening, kind of like, there's a great book out there that if you wanted to start with, just a book by Don Miguel Ruiz called The Four Agreements. And it explains just one aspect or four aspects of kind of like what it means to start to work your own inner medicine. And what the Toltecs believed, and that's what this tradition stems from, is that we are the artist of our lives. That's what Toltec means. It means you are the artist of your life. And so here I am, becoming the artist of my life. And what I love about all of this stuff, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm coming full circle, like right where I belong, right? I have become this artist of my life. And one of my favorite ways now to use the canvas with women is with desire work, because oftentimes, and this is what shamanic studies will also point to, is the story you've been living in. Maybe not the story you've been actively creating, but the story you've been a victim to and will continue to be a victim to unless you change the story, unless you realize you're actually an active author. You're actually an active narrator. You're the whole thing. But you have to learn the tools, practice, and teachings in order to change the story. And so I love working with women to change that story. And oftentimes one of my favorite things to do is to approach a canvas with like, let's paint the new story. What are we desiring? What are we manifesting into the world? Not by bypassing what needs to be looked at. But oftentimes a woman will come up with a desire that she can really feel in her body. And suddenly what's there? All the shadows that want to stop her from achieving what she wants. And so we're going to meet them by hook or by crook. They're going to be there.
Well, you explained that really well. And I love how you talked about both the Celtic shamanism that you studied and the indigenous. There's so many different schools of shamanic studies. And
Yes.
I think it's becoming, not the word popular, but more recognized now and more people are curious about it. And I've also studied it. So I know that it is a lot about doing that shadow work and recognizing those parts of you that you need to just take better care of and connect with. So thank you. That was
Yeah.
beautifully explained. What else about your work that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah. I think that one of the things that I'm really paying attention to right now is all of the distractions and the noise in the world. You and I kind of jumped on and we're talking about that a little bit. And we are going through an incredible time of transition and upheaval. And it's so necessary that we all recognize back to kind of what I was talking about before, the story that we're telling, because that story that's wanting to die is the story of scarcity. It's a story that undermines everything good in the world, and it's a lie. And it's the lie of scarcity. And there's a woman that I've studied under as well for many, many years. Her name is Lynn Twist, and she wrote a book called The Soul of Money. But money has no soul. We're the ones that have the soul. And so money isn't prosperity. It's money. It's a tool. True prosperity is when we have done the work and we come into a realization that we are enough just the way we are, right? Not abundant, not scarce, but sufficient, enough. Like we have enough, we are enough, there is enough. And when we come into right relationship with the world and ourselves, we realize we're not striving for more because more is just more, right? And we stop getting enrolled in the story of resignation and cynicism that tells us this is just the way it is. Just the way it is. It's always been this way. No, it hasn't always been this way. It hasn't. Like there was a time that human beings were in right relationship with the land and followed the seasons and knew how to be stewards, of the Garden of Eden. Like I truly believe this is heaven on earth. We've just been trained to see it through a viewfinder that shows us these hellish landscapes. But when we've done the work, we start to realize like the magic has always been right here. It's just been, I've been enrolled in this other story and I've trained myself to doom scroll. Like I'm living here in this story. Well, no. What about this story? This story of creation. What am I going to create today? How am I going to play today? How am I going to serve today? And as human beings, we have a birthright to be lit up by what we're doing, to be turned on by what we're doing. And so if you're listening and you're like, I'm miserable, then the first thing I would do is applaud you. Yay. Thank you. Thank you for just being honest. Like that's the first place to start. I'm miserable. And so how are we going to change that story? Right? And do you need a guide to lead you through to navigate your way to a new story? Because everybody thinks like, oh, coaches, it's about choosing a goal and reaching a goal and bettering it's like, no, good coaches are the ones who are going to come up alongside you and say, I see you. And they're going to help you become who you came here to be. Like the good ones who can accurately see you and can ask you the right questions that can help you to reveal yourself to yourself. That's the way through this. And I find that so many people have like a really inverted, in this inverted world, idea of what coaching is. It's not about you being the best, like the best. It's about you being the best you, right? It's being the most true you, the most authentic you. And so I would just encourage anybody listening, especially now, because these times are going to challenge the shit out of all of us. And so we need community. We need guides. We need Sherpas. We need shamans. We need people to lean into, and we need to be able to lean into each other. So thank you.
I love that. So talk about how you help people, how you help women.
Yeah. Okay. So there's one-on-one coaching, of course, but I find that over the course of many years, there's always these entry points, but the work is always the same, right? I might meet a woman who thinks that she wants to get consulting on her business, but essentially it becomes the same conversation, right? So I'm a consultant, I'm a coach, I'm a rites of passage practitioner. So often over the years, I would give workshops or I would do group coaching circles. And those coaching circles with other women were called Unbecoming. And I loved that word so much. And I'll probably put another women's circle out there soon. I'm just not quite there yet. And that was a journey of going into the underworld, but together, right? Because so many women are like, underworld, but the thing is, that's what we're designed to do as women. We're designed for that inner landscape. Nobody has taught us the tools and practices and teachings that help us to trust ourselves as we're navigating our inner world. So whether I'm just one-on-one coaching or doing it in a group of women, it's all about that inner landscape and starting to understand that our body holds the wisdom as women, and it's always talking to us and it's always listening to us. So learning to decipher what its language is and what it's saying to us, once we understand that, we'll never lose our way again.
Oh, beautifully. Beautiful. It's that heroine's journey.
It is. It really is. And I feel like that's the journey for every woman, is either and still even the myth of Inanna is the heroine's journey. It's just a different framework.
And where can I will put everything in the show notes if you want to just mention where people can find you with your
Sure.
socials and your website.
Yeah, so you're welcome to go to jointherevelation.com, and there I have a free gift for women called the Women's Bill of Rights. And I love the Bill of Rights because I wrote it for myself after I came out of a 9-month. Well, I was in bed for 9 months, barely could walk. My whole world had fallen apart. This is 16 years ago. And I had, of course, been in the underworld and didn't realize it. And so when I came back to the surface of life, I wanted to write myself a Bill of Rights so that I would never forget that I had rights. I had emotional rights. I have the right to be messy and magnificent. So the Bill of Rights is all about what I call the sacred and. It's like I have the right to make mistakes and still be chosen, right? I have the right to, leave the places that don't light me up. It's like things like this. And
Love
I
that.
always encourage women to write their own Bill of Rights. It's like, go ahead, use mine, look at mine, but write your own because it can be so powerful. And on that same website, jointherevelation.com, there's also about 180 podcast episodes where you'll hear not only my own personal story of navigating the underworld, but you'll hear interviews because so much of my goal over the course of the years of recording the podcast was to help excavate the stories that have been hidden from women all these years. And all of the various conversations that are not the traditional patriarchal program, right? It's like all of the conversations that celebrate the feminine, all of the ways that women are doing incredible work in the world and knowing them like yourself and interviewing them so that other women can have access to them had been so important to me because these women's voices need to be platformed, need to be highlighted. And so on there as well, I have interviews with all kinds of authors and exposés on different goddesses. And so you'll love that.
Love that.
Yes. And of course, at that same website, you can always decide if you want to have a chemistry call and find out if you want to, engage in a coaching program. And so that's all available on that same website. And you can also find me on Instagram at Revelation Woman.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I love your energy. I love what you're doing. And I
Thank
love that
you.
you're taking time for yourself. I think that's important. And all women should do that and follow that calling. And thank you for just shining your beautiful light, Monica. You're just
Oh
amazing.
my gosh. And Rose, I
Mhm.
just want to acknowledge you too, because your questions, like everything that you're doing in the world is so powerful. And I just always love to say, like, nobody really, I always would say when I was podcasting, like, the silence was deafening. It was almost like it took me years to understand that people were really listening and they were so impacted by listening to the podcast, but I never heard the feedback.
Same.
So, right. And so I'm saying this to you, Rose, because like, keep going, keep doing what
Thank
you're
you.
doing. Like, you have such a beautiful way of being.
Thank
And
you.
I love the conversations you're creating. And these are the conversations that matter. They matter the most. So
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be here.
Thank you. It means a lot that you said that to me. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Monica.
Yeah.